The Haunting of Hollow Ridge. Episode 12, The Final Offering. Nina's heart sank as she watched the others walk silently down the familiar path, away from Hollow Ridge. Their faces were pale, their eyes vacant. The weight of their fate bore heavily on all of them. They were prisoners to an endless cycle, forever trapped by the house's insidious power. But something inside her stirred, a spark of defiance that refused to fade. The others were ready to give up, but Nina wasn't. As they continued walking, the oppressive energy of the house lingered behind them like a dark cloud. The forest around them, twisted and unnatural, closed in with every step. They had escaped for now, but how long before the house pulled them back again? Nina stopped abruptly, causing the others to turn. "Nina, what are you doing?" Daniel asked, his voice weak. "We can't leave," she said quietly, her voice trembling but resolute. "Not like this. Not without trying something different." Tom scoffed, rubbing his temples as if trying to push away the growing headache. "We've tried everything, Nina. We can't break the curse. We're stuck in this loop, don't you get that?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "There's something we haven't done yet. Something we haven't figured out. The house. It let us go just now, didn't it?" Grace glanced around nervously. "What are you saying?" "The house is playing a game," Nina said, her eyes dark with understanding. "It feeds off our fear, our attempts to fight it. But what if that's the key? What if the only way to break the cycle is to give it what it wants?" Jack frowned, shaking his head. "Give it what it wants? Do you mean to let it win? That's crazy." "Not win," Nina corrected. "But if we stop trying to escape, if we offer ourselves to it, maybe we can take control." Daniel looked at her, confused and afraid. "And how exactly do we do that?" Nina took a deep breath, glancing back at the looming shadow of Hollow Ridge. "We go back in. Willingly. We face it one last time. But instead of fighting it, we offer something it can't resist." The group exchanged glances, fear and doubt clouding their faces. But there was a flicker of hope, too. This might be their last chance to truly escape. "Fine," Tom said after a long pause, his voice bitter. "But if this goes wrong, we're worse than dead." "It's already worse than that," Grace whispered. Nina turned, leading the way back toward the house. With every step, her heart pounded harder, but she kept her resolve. She couldn't let the fear consume her this time. As they neared the house, the air thickened with dread. The shadows around Hollow Ridge seemed to stretch toward them like long, skeletal fingers, and the doors, once closed, now stood wide open, as if beckoning them in. The house knew they were coming. They crossed the threshold and stepped into the dark foyer. The floor creaked beneath their feet, and the air was thick with the familiar scent of decay. The walls groaned, as if alive and eager for their return. Hollow Ridge was ready to claim them again. Nina took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the dimly lit space. "We need to go to the heart of the house." "Where is that?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The basement," Nina said with certainty. "That's where it all started." They descended the stairs, the atmosphere growing colder and more oppressive with each step. The basement was darker than they remembered, the walls seemingly pulsating with a life of their own. The shadows moved unnaturally, coiling around them like serpents. At the center of the room stood the old stone altar, cracked and worn with age. It was here that the dark rituals had been performed. It was here that the house had been given its power. "We offer ourselves," Nina whispered, stepping forward, her hands trembling but steady. But not in fear. In defiance. The others hesitated, but slowly, they joined her, standing around the altar in a circle. The air seemed to thrum with dark energy, the house sensing their presence. "What now?" Tom asked, his voice tight with fear. Nina closed her eyes, her heart pounding. "We speak to it. We let it know we're not afraid anymore." The silence in the room grew heavier and thicker until it was suffocating. And then, from the darkness, the familiar voice echoed. "You have returned," the voice whispered, cold and amused. "You cannot escape me. You never will. Nina's eyes snapped open, her gaze hard. We're not here to escape. The voice paused, seemingly taken aback. No? No, Nina said firmly. We're here to offer ourselves. But not in the way you want. You think you can defy me? The voice hissed, growing louder, angrier. The shadows around them began to writhe and twist, closing in. You feed on fear, Nina continued, standing her ground. But we're not afraid anymore. We're offering you the one thing you can't have, our defiance. The house seemed to shudder, the walls groaning in protest. The shadows swirled faster, but Nina didn't waver. You will never break us, she said, her voice rising. No matter how many times you trap us, no matter how many times we fall, we will always fight back. We're offering ourselves, but not in surrender. We're offering you a challenge. The room went deathly still. The air grew colder, and the shadows stopped moving. The voice, when it spoke again, was softer, almost contemplative. You are bold, it whispered. But you do not understand. I do not need your fear to sustain me. I need you. Nina frowned. What do you mean? You are not just victims, the voice continued. You are the key. You are the ones who complete the cycle. You are the offering. Nina's blood ran cold. She had thought the house wanted their fear, their pain, but it had wanted them all along. You were chosen the moment you stepped inside, the voice said. And now, you belong to me. The shadow surged forward, wrapping around them, pulling them toward the altar. The group struggled, but the dark tendrils held them tight. No! Nina screamed, but it was too late. The altar began to glow with a sickly light, and the house trembled as if feeding off their very souls. The air around them crackled with dark energy, and the walls began to close in. For a moment, it seemed as though all was lost. But then, just as the darkness threatened to consume them, a brilliant light erupted from the center of the altar, blasting the shadows back. Nina's eyes widened in shock. The light was coming from her. From them. The house screamed in fury, the voice echoing through the walls as the light grew brighter and brighter, pushing back the darkness. The walls cracked, the floor splintered, and the shadows evaporated into nothingness. We are not yours. Nina shouted, her voice filled with power. With a final, deafening crack, the house collapsed around them, the dark energy that had held it together unraveling into the void. The light from the altar consumed everything, and then... silence. Nina opened her eyes to find herself standing in the middle of an empty field. The others were beside her, alive and whole, but the house was gone. Hollow Ridge had vanished, leaving nothing behind but open sky and sunlight. We did it, Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. We're free. Nina took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the weight of the house was gone. They were free. The cycle was broken. End of episode 12.